Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. I'm your host, Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com. The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, or Masonic authority. And a quick reminder that you can now listen early and ad-free, just like to this episode, with our new subscriber offer. Get the link to start your free 7-day trial in the show notes for this episode. You've joined us for our next great talk, as it's kind of a tough task for him. We bring back Brother Matthew Brockbank from my mother lodge, St. George's Lodge, number 6 in Schenectady, New York. We're going to be talking about Millennial Freemasonry. So no pressure here, Matt. You're representing all Millennial Freemasons in this episode.
A whole generation is embodied in me right now. I feel all of them. I'm channeling them through me. I'm ready. I'm ready.
It's that millennial spirit, that go-getter attitude we were looking for. On your last visit, we talked about the historical lecture and the entered apprentice degree. And during that, you shed some insight into your passion for ritual and Masonic education. And it was cool because you were really opening up to us. And you had talked about what kind of led you to knocking on the door of our lodge at the age of 18, but we didn't really get to what it was that you were initially seeking to get as a Mason. And then kind of a follow-up question to that, did you find it, or like many of us, did you just find a path to continue your journey?
So when I initially knocked on the door, I believe at the time, the required age in New York was 21. Dropping the age to 18 may be a tactic to attract new, younger members, but I don't feel the problem is I don't think there's a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds who are like dying to become Masons, right? It's like, oh no, we have to capture that small market of Masons. I don't think it exists. Actually, quite the opposite. From my analysis of incoming members over the years, the trend is usually that men oftentimes find Masonry in their 30s or their 40s, unless they have a prior connection to Masonry, like I did through my father and his father before him. But yeah, when I joined, it was for two main reasons. The lesser reason actually was because my father was there. I mean, that was just a big bonus, right? That was nice. We had to spend time together, and doing ritual was fun because we were both passionate about it. But I never would have joined Masonry just for my father. And I think that anyone else, should not join exclusively for a familial tie. Nice to have, but that shouldn't be the reason that you join. The main reason for me, though, was because I was seeking more knowledge about life, and I felt that Freemasonry was the place to find it. And I mean the place. Out of all of the kind of secret societies, of all the mysteries, of all the religious texts, whatever you might want to call them, I thought that Freemasonry had the answers. So there was definitely a certain part of me that was, and perhaps still is, a student of history, and I thought that the ancient world held these esoteric truths that were kind of hidden behind the riddles, codes, and secrets that Freemasonry somehow had and passed down. Some are only the initiated and studious learners, and those people I think tend to gravitate towards Freemasonry, and by learning these truths, one could gain some kind of power or understanding that others might not. So I wanted to be one of these learners. I also wanted to know if Freemasonry actually had any political will, or if being a Freemason opened doors that wouldn't have been otherwise opened. Well, I think our brains have fanciful ways of making reality more interesting than it actually is. The real secret is, one of the first things you're usually told about Freemasonry is that it makes good men better, and that's it. That is the truth. It helps you reflect on how to be a better human being, because without that goal or intention, we tear each other down, and the human race will hit a breaking point devoid of cooperation and empathy. So that is, I think, definitely a truth that, no pun intended, holds true. Masonry makes good men better. Yeah, definitely. As for things like, political power, I think it's actually the other way around. I think it's that politics in general yields or wields power. And sometimes politicians are Freemasons. Back in the day, many politicians were Freemasons because the lifestyles certainly overlapped. And if there was a large contingent of artists in Freemasonry, right, or a large contingent of, I don't know, Hollywood executives, you might say that Freemasonry controls the art world, or Freemasonry controls movies and TV. But both of those wouldn't be the case. So I think it just happens to be that political people ended up in Freemasonry. Not that Freemasonry tried to, control politics, but that was something I was trying to figure out as well. Like, is this true? I think a lot of people as well. You go in and you definitely you hear the myths and the tales, and you're like, well, at some point I'm gonna debunk these or see if they're true. And then in conclusion, though, you don't need Freemasonry to be a good person or to conquer the secrets held within Freemasonry. But I think Freemasonry allows every man to learn them without having to do all the work kind of on your own. Freemasonry, if you will, is kind of a collaboration of many people and all of these ideas kind of coming together in one place. And this is the place that you can learn how to be a better person.
I think you've kind of fallen to the legacy and mystique is what the aura of Freemasonry kind of drew you. But I want to circle back to the one point you made, which I've jotted this down, and it's a very profound quote. Freemasonry had the answers. I think that a lot of guys come to Masonic lodges because there's that internal question that they're asking, which varies, but it all kind of is related. It's, what's my purpose? How do I become a better person? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? And we kind of already knew what that answer was. And I feel like through Freemasonry, we get the confidence to embrace that answer and really kind of connect the head to the heart, that it's been in our heart of what we're supposed to be doing, but now our head is finally open to it. I think the other part of the Freemasonry had the answers question, which is appealing to me because you're a unique brother in the sense that, I'm imagining when you said your friends, hey, I can't come and hang out with you tonight. I'm going to be practicing or studying ritual with my dad. People were probably thinking, do they go down in the basement? Is there somebody down there in a hole? I mean, it's just not something that is common. Your friends must have been like, wow, those Brockbanks, they're pretty cool. But I think for you, it was probably a similar experience that I had, where you spend that first year in the craft learning, going through the degrees, and you're like, wow, this is so neat. And then let's talk about that year afterwards. You're a master mason, you're coming to lodge, you're expecting that every single discussion is going to be around these ancient mysteries. And what are they talking about? Budgets, replacing, filling cracks in the sidewalk outside of the building, hall association business, basically.
Yes. I think that there is kind of a, there's another coming to light moment, right? Freemasonry, at the end of the day, it has to be a little bit of a business, and that sometimes is a little disenchanting, but it's just the nature of the beast, right? You need money to operate, and there is regular kind of mundane things that go on in a lodge. I don't want to say that Masons should lead with that or be upfront about it. I think it is something that has to be kind of accepted, early on, or at least understood that this is not just a bunch of wise old wizards looking at through texts to find the secrets of Freemasonry. Like, it's not that at all. I mean, it can be, sure, like go for it. Like, there's definitely a part of Freemasonry that allows for that kind of study, but at the end of the day, it is, yes, it is maintaining a physical building to hold lodge. It is collecting dues from members. It is operating. I would compare it to a car. The car may be fun to drive, and that's where the fun of Freemasonry is. But at the same time, like, it's an engine that needs resources to run, and just the lodge also needs resources to run. So when you kind of figure all that out, you're like, okay, well, there's a couple things here that need to happen, and I get that, and I don't think it should detract, and I don't think it should scare anyone away. But it is there, so I think just accepting it is a good thing.
And I think, again, you and I share a similar situation, although, your background, you had more exposure, for lack of a better term, to the craft or the operation or what Freemasonry was, where I came in with very little background knowledge on it. But I do recall, and this was, kind of dating ourselves here, but New York recently, I would say within the last 5 years, allowed lodges to open on any degree. But there was a time when lodges could only open and conduct business on the Master Mason degree.
Yep.
They would have to drop down for the other degrees that they were going to confer on candidates. So as someone that would be petitioning a lodge or even an entrant apprentice or fellow craft, you could come to the lodge for dinner, but at our mother lodge that's downstairs in the basement area, and then you'd hear them all walking upstairs, and you're hearing, the sounds of the wood floors creaking above you, and you're like, what are they doing up there? Oh, I hear knocking sounds. I thought I heard somebody say something, and what are all the, and you're always curious. And then once you get the chance to be in that room, you're like, oh, it's kind of a business meeting. However, there are cool programs. Like, I'll never forget the first time I walked into St. George's and there was an actual skeleton head on a table because we were doing a Lodge of Sorrow, and there was this whole ritual that was being performed as part of the program that evening. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like, this explains the whole memento mori. This explains why we talk about the eternity of a soul. So I don't want a prospective brother or an interested gentleman to hear us go, oh, yeah, well, you're going to spend this whole year reading these books and getting all jazzed up about it. And then you get your degrees, and it's kind of like in real life. You're like, well, why did I go through this process? I could have just come right in here. That there is a meaning to that. And what's also interesting is, you're a millennial. I think I just missed out on it. I'm technically a Gen Xer, I think. My brother is a couple years younger than me, so he falls into the millennial group. But either way, you and I, if we walked into most lodges, I'm 45, you're early 30s, we would probably be the youngest men in the room.
Probably.
In most lodges where we live. What was your feeling? Were you prepared for that? Obviously, your dad's a member, his friends, but what did it feel like being the youngest guy in the room?
Truthfully, it's very lonely. Freemasonry has endured through multiple centuries, each of which had a kind of like a different flavor of Freemasonry, if you will. And, I can start by saying that, back in terms of like, we'll call it the founding fathers of America, Freemasonry, quote unquote. Most of those men were the same generation. They had very similar interests, right? They lived kind of nearby. And most were about the same age because you became a Freemason at 21 and you probably died at 50 of like dysentery or something, trying to cross the Oregon Trail. So, it's like, okay, yeah, those people had a lot in common because of course they did. But, there weren't that many jobs back then. The world was much smaller, quote unquote. And now you have, 18-year-olds, you have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way up to, 80s. You see people in lodge, they're definitely, octogenarians, and they're still getting out there, and that's their hobby, and that's great. But what does an 80-year-old and a 20-year-old actually have in common? Well, I'm sure you're all yelling at the radio or the phone or whatever, however you're listening. You're saying, well, of course they have Freemasonry in common. Yes, yes. And Freemasonry and perhaps, similar reasons for being there. And I just want to kind of go off on a side tangent real quick and just say that is one of the greatest strengths of Freemasonry. It's in the first degree historical lecture regarding brotherly love. Masonry unites men of every country, sect, and opinion and promotes true friendship among those who might have remained perpetually at a distance. I love that line, by the way, and that is one of the lines that I do enjoy saying, and I try to put a little bit more emphasis on it because you may think to yourself, yes, I know some people in my lodge who are of a different opinion, politically speaking, or just maybe there's I, of course, being from New York, I'm a Yankees fan, maybe that guy's a Red Sox fan, or what have you, right? There's definitely people with different opinions, and for the most part, you kind of put those opinions aside, and you're able to kind of rib each other a little bit, but you never let it hurt anyone's feelings. But let's get down to like the brass tacks about it here. What could a 20-year-old and an 80 or a 70-year-old actually have in common beyond masonry? Not much, I'd gander. If we're talking about Freemasonry from a social perspective, it's hard to want to spend your emotional and mental energy on something like that, being around people who you have nothing in common with, again, it's a lonely feeling and it's kind of emotionally draining. If you treat masonry like a job or an exercise, like going to the gym, except for your mind and your heart, then you can probably, lessen that feeling of loneliness. But I find it very hard to find things in common with most brothers who are not in my age range. And I think other people would probably echo that. So it is also important not just to, oh, I found a lodge, it's close by, I petition, I'm joining now. You really should, and I don't want to say like shop around, that's not the term I'm looking for here, but you should, experience a couple lodges. And even if you have a friend at one lodge, maybe yes, that's definitely a plus and a good reason maybe to join that one. But, if there's another lodge where you,
as you were talking about relationships that you can potentially build in lodges, two of the myths that I scribbled down was that one is that young people, millennials, the knock on them is that they just don't care. They're all about themselves. Millennials, we blame you for ruining everything.
yeah, right.
And then the other myth is that old people don't want to talk to anybody about anything. They kind of shut down, they shut in, and I would challenge that. Now, again, I was not a 18-year-old going to lodge when I first went to our Mother Lodge, St. George's. I was probably in my mid-30s, but I'll never forget the really cool conversation I had with Right Worshipful Henry Michelin.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry was this older gentleman. Gosh, I mean, he probably in his late 70s, I think, when I was going there. He would always wear a teddy bear tie that I think had some significance to one of his grandkids that had a disorder or something. And he would always sit with the other older guys. And I think your dad would kind of gravitate over to that table for a little bit, but then he would always sit near the new candidate. So your dad was kind of had a foot in, both spaces.
Yep.
But I'll never forget the night that Henry opened up and talked about being a state trooper in New York State and pulling somebody over, and then it coming over the radio that President Kennedy had been shot, and getting back into his squad car and racing back to the barracks. And I love history. And I'm like, I could have talked with him about this 6 months ago. Like, why is this just coming? This was so cool. Like, he was very detailed, the wind, where it was, like, I was just so amazed, and the fear and the sadness, and he really came to light about that. And I think the other myth that brothers have, and I certainly did, was building off of that conversation with Henry. Couple meetings later, we're sitting down at the table for dinner, and I started having a conversation with him about some of the deeper meanings that I was studying in the ritual. And again, like, this light turned on, and he started talking about and I'm like, yeah, this is why these guys are coming. Like, yeah, there's some social element to it, right? But this is also the safe place they know where they can talk about these pursuits. And I think we're kind of encouraged to hear that, some young whippersnapper like me actually was studying and asking them questions about it.
A lot of the older members, I'm sure that, they want nothing more than to see new, young, fresh blood come in and, really get excited about Freemasonry. And then, of course, like you said, they have someone to talk to. Freemasonry is social. But at the end of the day, it is also, again, it's an organization that has to be governed. There are business meetings, and they definitely want to, have those young people, and they get excited about them. I think that's, definitely true. Sometimes people say, oh, the old guys, they try to run the lodge, but really, at the end of the day, I think that, yes, you do see it sometimes, but I think at the end of the day, they do want the young people to come in and get excited, and, in turn, they get excited about that. I think you're absolutely right.
We were talking about the intent of young people when it comes to petitioning a lodge, and you're a researcher. I do research and analyst work as well. One stat that kind of hit me was that millennials are most likely the most educated generation in history. So I'm just going to leave that there and let it simmer for a while. The latest estimate shows that 47% of millennials have a college education or degree. We've talked a lot. You and I have talked about that rough and perfect ashlar. I know that's one of your favorite parts of the ritual. Instead of looking at that as a way of improving our character or our morality, Do you also see a rough and perfect Ashlar connection to personal growth and maybe continuing education?
Yeah, I do. I think the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar, again, two of my favorite artifacts in Freemasonry. I don't think that the ashlar benefits from your working tools through scholarly education as much as it benefits, I think, from life experience. And I know everyone right now is thinking, oh, you're talking about, the book smart versus street smart thing. Put that aside for 1 second. We do learn things in school, yes, right? We learn a ton in school. However, I think 98, 99% of the real things we learn in life are, through experience. I think of life and education like a series of rooms separated by knowledge doors. You can go to school and you can become educated, but that education will just open more of those doors for you. But what makes a person wise is stopping to gather the experience and the understanding in those rooms. See what I mean? That's why, maybe some people say, it's empty upstairs, right? You've got a bunch of rooms, but you've got nothing in them. Education opens those doors. You've got, bigger house, more rooms, nothing in the rooms. So people spend a lot of time just becoming intelligent, meaning, they accumulate facts, but those facts are nothing without wisdom, how you use and apply those facts. Freemasonry tries, I think, to teach you both in allegory, but tell me this, kind of feels familiar, right? You read something in Freemasonry and you don't think much of it, and then all of a sudden, because of a life experience, you're like, oh my God, Freemasonry was right. And it clicks, and you just kind of understand, oh, that's what that passage was trying to tell me, but I didn't get it the first time because it was just intelligence. It wasn't wisdom yet. So in the end, I think personal growth and education are not opposites. They're just two pieces of the puzzle. And, you need both of them for the full picture.
I want to jump into the rough and perfect Ashlar. I know that's part of your expert area in our degree work when it comes to the historical lecture. I read and Kirk McNulty, I'll give him all the credit for this. He talked about the purpose of them being in the lodge room is not just to have the physical representation, because it is weird when you first come into a lodge room. If and the sight of an altar doesn't make you go, why do you guys have an altar? Do you do prayers? Yes, we do. So where the volume of sacred law rests. Why do you have one of those in there? Well, we'll explain that too. Then what's the deal with these two rocks? Is it for someone to trip as they're trying to go up the 3 stairs?
Yeah. Literally a giant rock, and it's heavy as heck. I mean, the thing weighs at least like 40, 50 pounds.
And his takeaway was that the perfect ashlar is for us to take our working tools and sharpen them. And that as craftsmen, as we're out in the world working amongst, that our tools get dull. And one of the reasons why we come to lodge is to find that enrichment and enlightenment.
Oh.
Kind of building on that, I'll paraphrase a little bit of our ritual a bit here and change some words, but we're really sharpening our minds to be those living stones. And I think when you speak of a generation that tends to be more educated than previous, they're probably going to be more curious about other ways in the world. They don't focus on just themselves as an individual, but they see the larger spectrum of things that maybe previous generations did not. And I would think that that concept of getting better intellectually, which then leads to a better person with your personality and your choices in life, your morality, would be very appealing to a young person who's in that right frame of mind.
The millennial generation, and maybe a little bit, I'll give Gen Z a bone here. I think, the empathy is strong with us, and I think that is important as the world gets, closer together. We start to realize that, we really are, here together on this, rock floating through space, and that we need to take care of one another. I mean, Freemasonry says it right at the beginning, right? Charity. And I think that is something that, my generation specifically has really tuned into, because for the most part, our parents' generation, whether it be, boomers, the Flower Children, Gen X, I think that we have been really set up for success. And I know that millennials now are projected to earn less than their parents, which is just a product of the times currently. But I still think that we have been given pretty much how would you put this, like the cleanest palette and the best advantages than any other generation. So I think that we look at ourselves and say, wow, we are quite privileged as a people, to be here. We've been given a lot. So, how can we now not focus on ourselves so much, but focus on others? So I think that's definitely a strong feeling amongst the millennial generation. And I think that's where kind of Freemasonry has to say to themselves, okay, do we want to be stuck in, what the Middle Ages? I mean, how do we want to be? Do we want to be a well? See, a lot of lodges, they say, colonial lodge, it's very good. But do you want to be known as just the stuck in the past lodge, or do you kind of want to embrace some of the things that come with the 21st century? Technology being one of them.
Because it is one of the tools to solve problems. And it's not like past generations didn't embrace it. I mean, if we go all the way back to like the printing press, and that was used to create the pamphlets and all the exposés that now are showcasing Freemasonry. But I feel, while there were some silver linings with the COVID-19 pandemic and living in the public health emergency, especially in New York, I'm sure we were able to attend so many virtual meetings and interact with lodges all around the world that we'd never be able to step foot in. However, my question to you is, do you feel there is this divide between younger and older brothers when it comes to using technology just merely as a communication / social platform?
Yeah, 150%. I think that technology is I think this is the number one problem, or the thing that holds Freemasonry back the most. Not only does it make us look like Luddites, but it makes scheduling, attendance, communication, and finances easier if we embrace it. And not embracing it makes all those things harder. There are so many resources out there to make Freemasonry more accessible and more exciting. But some brothers will cry to the heavens about how Freemasonry is rooted in the old ways, and to deviate from that would be blasphemous. I think it starts with the basic fact, again, that we have such a huge age disparity between these brothers. And I'll walk through a handful of things that lodges could do involving technology that would, in my humble opinion, have a positive impact on membership. So firstly, having an online presence of some kind. I should be able to go online and I should be able to look up any lodge, and at the bare minimum, find information about that lodge, the location, days that they hold meetings, the officers, and a downloadable PDF application for that lodge. You can do that for free. There is no money required, right? There are numerous hosting services that you can piggyback off of. If you want, you can purchase a domain for $12 a year. That's $1 a month. It's not expensive. Beyond that, all business meetings could be held virtually via Zoom for members who can't make it. I'll go so far as to say that you can turn off the camera for the ritual work, or turn it back on for the business meeting, or you can, of course, there is a way, right, to have private meetings and password protected logins. So realistically, you could have a ritual via Zoom. No reason you can't. Again, it's not hard to do. It just takes planning, and most of us, or most of those resources, are very inexpensive. Next, at bare minimum, all lodges should have some form of social media. It doesn't have to be public, although I think it should. But what I mean by that is every lodge can have a Discord channel, or a subreddit, or a private Facebook group, whatever platform, you pick one you like. The point here is that you need to keep the lodge social, and not just during lodge meetings. Today, members can live an hour or two apart, and being able to engage outside the lodge is important to keeping up morale and organizing members for events and things, both lodge related or otherwise. Again, this is all free to do. On the note of social media, I think lodges should either ramp up the secretary's responsibilities or create a social tech officer. This officer would not only be in charge of all social media accounts, but also responsible for making sure that, Zoom gets set up and the lodge info online is correct, et cetera, et cetera. But I will play devil's advocate. Maybe we don't do any of that stuff, right? Maybe Freemasonry remains as low tech as possible, because in a world of nothing but ever advancing technology, we want a place that's kind of grounded in those old ways, no screens, right? Well, you have to ask yourself, because you need membership, whether you think so or not, right? And lodges need members. What gets your lodge to a sustainable membership count? Using technology or not using technology? And when does low tech become old tech? Maybe some technology is necessary and is still considered low tech, like you just said, like the printing press, right? Like that's tech, it's low tech and old tech, but we still you use it. But we still use things like a TV screen or a projector, right, for a presentation in the lodge, perhaps. That's technically speaking, that's low tech at this point, considering all the other technology that's out there. But I think that's technology that I think most of us can agree is, usable and accessible, considering that the opposite, the high tech would be augmented or virtual reality, AI, et cetera. So, you have to ask yourself, like, what kind of technology are we willing to embrace? What do we consider too advanced or appropriate for our lodge? And I think people really need to kind of, have that conversation. And it might be awkward at first, but I think every lodge needs to have that conversation and say, okay, what are we doing to stay relevant? Because, I think that at the end of the day, when you don't embrace some of that technology that's out there, I think that you are not intentionally, but I think you are being a kind of a bystander, if you will, by not using that technology, and you're making everyone's life a little bit harder. If everyone had to write a check, or pay, let's say everyone had to pay cash, or get a bank, even harder. Let's say to pay dues, everyone had to use a bank check. That would be awful. There should be an online portal. I mean, heck, it could be Venmo. I don't know, but an online portal to pay your dues, that just makes common sense and makes everyone's life easier. So at what point are you getting in the way by not allowing technology? Or, or maybe you're having those conversations and you're actually trying to move towards a better place. But either way, I think the conversation should be had in some form.
Yeah, no, just you talking about this made me think of all the dinners that we would have at St. George's before our lodge meetings.
Oh, yeah.
The stress of like, oh my gosh, I got to stop and get an ATM. I'm a Gen Zer who doesn't carry cash. I'm a Gen Xer that doesn't have, that I barely use plastic for things. And I remember like I'm like going up to somebody and being like, can we just have like a prepaid meal program that is still maybe in a digital wallet, or even if there's a mark I would check on a wall somewhere? Like,
thank you. Yes, that's what, Mike, that's the perfect example. I, as a millennial, rarely carry cash. I do have an ATM card, usually, or a credit card. And, why can't lodges have a little Square app? Boop, boop, pay with Square.
And I don't want to look past the three priorities there, initiatives or challenges that you said that lodges face. I think all of them, just about every grand jurisdiction has embraced that. Lodges need to have a functioning website. They need to have a social media presence. I like the part of having kind of a digital officer role, or honestly takes a lot of pressure off the master and the secretary, who usually by default have to update this unless the lodge has a webmaster. Cost is always a factor too. There's some things that are, a challenge. Is, do you have a brother in house that can take care of this? Is there a Grand Lodge resource? But when people ask me what I think the most successful Masonic lodge is, I think the answer surprises a lot of them, because I've actually never stepped foot in this lodge before. I've only visited it virtually. I have signed up for their emails, and I swear to God as my witness that if I'm ever in Denver, Colorado, when they have a meeting, I can't wait to go in and meet the brothers at Denver Lodge number 5, because they do all of the things that you talked about. They have cameras set up in their lodge rooms so that they can share lodge programs. The presentation part to brothers that are all over. It's like music to your ears, right? Why? So why have they been able to do this? I sign up for their emails. I read their trestle board from their master because I just find it so fascinating that they communicate with clarity. I believe that they were able to make these changes because look at the brothers of that lodge. Many of them are millennials or Gen Xers like myself who have not just forced this lodge to change. They weren't just going to wait for their grand jurisdiction or Colorado to start making these changes, but they stepped up to lead them. And if I have one criticism to millennials, is it for the 5 of you that are actually, no, just kidding. for those of you that can embrace a leadership role or can contribute to a solution or an outcome, please raise your hand and do it, because what will happen? No one else is there to do this. You need to step up. I wasn't looking at you, Matt, specifically. You're on the screen.
Thanks. No, I absolutely. Yeah, it's, lodges are not going to change, on their own, unless someone steps up, or unless, of course, Grand Lodge, dictates. But it takes, people to do the work. As simple as that. And, I think I would look towards the West Coast a little bit. And I'm not surprised it's coming from Denver, very progressive place. St. George's being a colonial lodge. I mean, oh man, it's hard. It's really hard. We're just, the embodiment of old school. Yeah. I mean, I think that just runs a little bit in our veins, and that might deter, the embracing of technology a bit. And I think that's, it's tough. It's just tougher. It's not impossible. It's just tougher.
It's slow steps too. It's not going to change overnight. I mean, it's
right.
It's a scaffolding process. So, man, I really, again, appreciate your time, and I'll get you out of here with this question tonight. We started this whole podcast kind of examining Freemasonry and millennials' place and time, and I feel that Freemasonry is shaped by the Masons who were actually there at that point in history. So is it fair to say that maybe we shouldn't be asking what do millennials want from Freemasonry, like it's some big mystery or something, but rather we should be saying, what can millennials bring to Freemasonry?
I don't know if you're going to like my answer or not, but
okay. Well, you're representing all millennials, so
I'm representing all millennials. I gotta speak for us from the heart. Yeah, I think we can ask, what can millennials bring to Freemasonry? But first, I will retort with, how do you get millennials or Gen Z at this point into Freemasonry to begin with? Because they can't do anything for Freemasonry if they're not there. If I'm looking for ways to better myself in 2023, I can find a hobby that's online. I can explore something lower tech, like woodworking, something I do personally. I can better myself by going to the gym, which is a club, if you will, right? You have to have membership, right? I can play in a local sports league, or I can join a group like the Freemasons. So what does Freemasonry offer people outside the promise of making good men better? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of ambiguous if you really think about it. And why can't it make lesser men better? Why do they have to be good men to begin with? But you're right. We already know what what millennials want from Freemasonry. So the real question is, are lodges willing to pivot as the millennial generation starts coming of lodge age, as we'll call it? Like I said at the top of the episode, most folks don't join as soon as they're able. We won't be thinking about Gen Z members for probably another, 15 or 20 years. But right now, seriously, lodges have to start thinking about millennials, because they are aging and getting a better handle on their careers, their finances, their family. And as they approach 40 or middle age, how do we draw their attention? The main problem, and I'll say it extra loud for those older folks who are hard of hearing, or the ones sitting in the north, Dad. I think at some point you have to let go. The lodge will be okay, but you have to stop using it as your personal clubhouse. Stop tying your entire identity to your chair or your leadership position. Lodges always have those two types of brothers. And as they age, they either gracefully step back and let the next generation govern, or they stubbornly hang on and try to dictate the future of the lodge. So the last thing I'll say about this is ask them, the millennials, ask young members, what can you do for the lodge? Just like young people need to talk and learn from their elders, as you pointed out with, Brother Henry, who, great human being, by the way. I echo everything you said, excellent guy to talk to. The elders need to utilize what the next generation knows and can bring to the table. So to kind of answer your question, right? If you ask a new member what their skills are and they say, oh, social media, don't just brush it off as malarkey. Ask them, how can they set up a social media component for the lodge? Doing so will get the new brother invested in the lodge and probably get him to stick around a lot more. On top of that, whatever work they put in will no doubt help with membership. So it's a win-win.
I know you didn't rehearse that, but when you talked with your dad about this, did he say, you know what, insert the word malarkey so that people my age know what you're saying, son?
Yeah, right. I have to throw a couple of those, buzzwords in there so they pick it up.
This has been the Craftsman Online podcast. Again, big thanks to my guest, Brother Matthew Brockbank, for coming on again. Thank you, brother. We look forward to having you in a couple more times before we close out this year if possible.
Awesome. I would love that. I have a great time every single evening we do this, Mike. It is really one of the small pleasures that I truly, truly enjoy. So thank you.
If you enjoy our podcast and you want to hear more, you can tell Siri or Alexa to play the Craftsman Online podcast. We're available on all streaming platforms with new episodes every Monday morning. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.